Welcome to the Museum of Aquarium and Pet History. We are still at Super Zoo 2024, and I'm really excited. I have someone from the largest private pet industry in the industry. Well, not including Mars, but Mars cheats because they get venture capital money. So really they are truly the largest pet industry company, legendary company, and this one of my favorite people really. This is Rolf Hagen Jr. from Hagen Company Incorporated.
Thanks for having me.
So let me talk about your parents for a minute here, okay, for Rolf Sr. He immigrates to Canada in 1955. But before he gets to Canada, he stops in the United States because he wants to immigrate to the United States. They tell him no. So he turns around and goes to Canada instead. How does that happen?
Never really got a true angle on it, or he never talked about it. The way he had explained it to us is he wanted to move to Montreal. So honestly, he never really talked about that to us.
So I need to talk to Horst or Dieter.
Yeah, my uncles will have probably more color
They'll have
on
the
that.
true story on that one. That's great.
But how he got to Canada, how he got in the industry is an interesting story. He was one of 10 children, right? And he was the one that was able to get the opportunity to go to the big city, which was Hamburg. And he worked in an import-export company, and that's where he met Dr. Bench from Tetra, because they were importing mosquito larvae and raw materials through that company and selling it to Tetra. And that's where my dad had worked. And that's how he got the relationships with some of the individuals in the German industry at the time post the war, and how he got the agency for Tetra, and how he started his business.
Wow.
And that's what he came with when he wanted to come to North America, USA or Canada. He already had that relationship with Tetra, where he was able to have the agency for Canada, United States, Mexico, and Japan, I believe.
Really?
Yeah. So he hit the ground running, and he knew when he was in this company, that's where he met my mom. My mom thought he was the boss, but he was actually the second in charge, and he knew that other gentleman was going to be there for another 20 plus years. So that's why he wanted to strike out on his own. And he heard about this fish food and this gentleman, and he met him and had a dinner with him, and famously in one of the nicest restaurants in Hamburg. And my dad didn't have enough money, so he didn't eat. He pretended he had a stomach ache. And he had given the maitre d' some money previously to pretend that he knew him. So he impressed this, scientist, Dr. Ulrich Bench, the founder of the modern, much the way you're the founder of the modern reptile hobby, he was the founder of the modern aquatic hobby with Tetra.
Wow.
And Dr. Bench was impressed by this young man, and my dad was able to convince him, and I think he even gave him the first container, first shipments on credit. Wow. And that's how he really started. So our basis, our DNA is really that relationship with Tetra.
What's interesting is I have a Tetra ashtray from Hagen.
Yeah.
It has like Hagen, it has Tetra on it. It's a giant ashtray when everybody in the pet industry smoked.
Right, right.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone did back then.
Do you remember the Tetra calendars with the stamped calendars that they would give out every year with all the fish on it? It was a very classy organization.
Do you have a set of those?
I have a whole set, yeah.
Okay, well send them to me when you get a chance.
Okay.
All right, what about birdseed? Didn't he import birdseed as well?
That was another big part of the business in the early days. He was able to go out into Western Canada, into the prairie provinces, as a German immigrant with a German accent, 10 years after the war. And in these small towns, which had sent a lot of their young men to fight Germany, right, in the war. And he was able to convince them to grow specific seeds, which he then exported back to Germany.
Really?
And he had some relationships there that still stood to the day he died. They were still friends of his and people that he kept in touch with. The early family out of Saskatchewan. And he told them that, he was only going to make a few points. But, he was making 10%, but I think it was more around 40, 50%. So that was where the capital came from, that exporting seeds back into Europe.
Really?
Yeah. And he did that for quite a while. And I think at a point he had to decide between importing pet products like Vitacraft, Hykro from Denmark, Tetra from Germany, or the seed broker business. And then he decided to stick to the pet side of it.
No, why Quebec? Why not Ontario?
Montreal at the time was like the city in the 50s.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a cosmopolitan city. It had jazz clubs, strip joints, and beautiful French Canadian ladies. And it was Toronto at that time was very Puritan. Things were closed on Sundays. Bars closed at 10 o'clock. It was a very different than it is today. Toronto being a world-class city today.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, no, he had a friend. I have to say, again, my uncles will know this far better than I. He had a friend who was a taxi driver, and he could share his apartment with them, so he had a place to stay.
One reason I said that too is Emmanuel told me one time when he bought a house in Quebec, he goes, I looked at the house in the best weather, the best 3 weeks of weather of Quebec, and he goes, my God, the rest of the year is so damn cold.
Yeah, it's brutal. In February, it's brutal.
That's what he said. He said it was really brutal back then. Well, I have this magazine, this old Australian magazine with you and your dad on the cover.
Wow.
And it's got this great article in here from Frank Williams of Australia, one of your biggest Australian customers.
Right.
And Frank said the first time he met your dad, Rolf Sr., he was in a meeting with him. And he had just started the meeting. And the secretary comes to the door of your dad and says, we got Leonard Stern outside with 2 bodyguards. And he just flew in. He's in a rush. He needs to talk to you right now. And your dad said, you tell Leonard I'm in a meeting. I'll be with him in a half hour. And I'll tell you, Frank never forgot that. Frank was this brand new distributor in Australia who wanted your dad's line, and your dad stuck up for him and told Leonard to sit his butt down and wait a half hour. Amazing.
Yeah.
That stuff goes, he never forgot it. He wrote it in a magazine. He never forgot that.
No, my dad was a very correct person. He was a great judge of character.
Yeah.
Very patient and generous until he was very efficient. So sometimes you had 30 seconds to say something to him, but he was never mean. He never used profanities. He rarely raised his voice. He just had that powerful presence.
Right.
And he's just a correct human being. It was just like a good person. Some people are good people. My dad was a really good person.
Did your father ever import canaries?
Oh my gosh, we were a huge importer of birds from all over the world, and the cockatiels from the Czech Republic.
Really?
There's another Tetra story. So Tetra was selling product in the Czech Republic, and Uncle Horst did a barter deal where we bought cockatiels from the Czech Republic, and we paid Tetra the cash they sold into the Czech. So the cockatiels came to us, the fish food went to them, and someone got the cash. It was some sort of 3-way barter deal. And we had barns up in north of the city where we would quarantine the birds.
Really?
The government officers would come in, and I think they got a little something on the side to, expedite the quarantine, because there were some famous stories where half the birds didn't make it. But we had a full livestock division: guinea pigs, hamsters, parrots, and to this day, Mark Hagen, my brother, still operates a bird breeding facility in Montreal.
And it's very well known, that bird breeding facility.
Yeah, and it's legit. Like when we produce our food, we first test it in the facility before we release it to market. So he developed it. We produce it in our own plant on our own extruder, and then it's tested with these captive. I think we're on the 4th generation of captive bred birds. We've done bone density tests and with veterinarians. So his product is quite good. But yeah, there was a long history of birdseed and birds, and
That's
and
incredible.
we just, at one point when I became president in 2006, I believe it was, we just said, this is maybe not what we need to be doing any longer. There was some controversy as well. You've got to do livestock right and have the proper husbandry, and that was for us kind of becoming an afterthought. So it was either really do it right or let someone else do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, they imported monkeys, and that's the one story Dieter may want to tell you, but it may be X-rated. It may not be for this audience. About some monkeys that got out of the cage.
Oh, okay.
And the 2 Hagen brothers trying to catch them on a Friday night.
I can only imagine.
After a few beers.
Jeez. So, did your father speak English and French?
He made the effort to learn French, but he never spoke it properly. And what he would do at our famous trade shows that took place in every September north of the city with all of our Quebec customers, he would have it spelled out phonetically, I guess is how you say it, and then he would just read it.
Sure.
And it was we would kind of giggle and laugh because we're all fluent in French. We need to be, but he made that effort. So our Quebec customers really appreciated that he made that effort.
When you were growing up, did your parents speak to you in German?
It was English, except when they would be coming back from Germany. So they would go almost every May and September for like 3 weeks. And that first week or two when they would come back, it was like they were just in German mode. So then it was German. And
so you speak fluent German?
My German is okay. It's not bad. I don't really write it. I can read it. it's hard to read. Some of the words are really long.
Right.
Oh, my mom got angry then, she'd switch to German type of stuff. She threw something at us. And they spoke German with each other. And what my dad also speaks is a dialect of German called Plattdeutsch, which is really, really hard. It's a completely alien language. If you hear it, it doesn't sound like anything else.
That's amazing.
It's almost like Latin. And he spoke fluent Plattdeutsch. He was one of the only people in his family that could speak it.
And your mom understood it?
Yes, she could understand some of it. But he did it more when he was in his hometown. And the day my dad died, he said in Plattdeutsch, hold my head, to my mom. So his last words were in this dialect.
Really?
You can imagine, yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So at one time you guys had a chain of pet shops.
We did, yeah. We were always very proactive in financing Canadian retail. So if someone wanted to open a store or, we were their bank in one way, we were their first bank. Back in the day, Crime Services, Alan and Tally Saul, or Robert Brissett at Petland, we were always there to support them with credit and with loans and with, long dated opening orders. And so we were kind of now in an indirect way involved in retail. And then an opportunity came to invest in one retailer who had the idea to build these new superstores. And his name was Peter Murrill, and the stores were PJs. And Peter wintered in Phoenix, and he saw this new store come up called PetSmart. And he said, okay, this is interesting. So he came to my dad and he said, listen, I have this idea to build these 20,000 square foot stores, and we can make them 70% Hagen. You've got all the different categories covered, some better than others, obviously, but, I need money. And so my father decided the company would help finance the first, I think, 3 stores.
Right.
And in exchange for, I don't know if we call it a debenture or a lien, not quite direct ownership, but eventually that became ownership. And then eventually we had to take over the stores as they got into a little bit of trouble. And it was always a conflict for us. And this is the one time I never saw my father ever be incorrect, but they just outright lie. Are you guys involved in retail? No, it's a Japanese guy, or something. And I'm a bit proud because one of the first things I did is I went to some of these customers and said, it's us. And we want to get out of it. And they said, thank you for telling the truth. These stores were like Hagen showrooms. And, it was a bit ridiculous. At some points, you'd have aqua clear filters, and you'd have 12 on the shelf when you only needed 3. And then they had another 72 up in the rafters in empty boxes.
Well, you need that many aqua clear filters,
It was stuff like that. But we did finally get out. And it was my father, one of his last memos that he wrote in 2011. We were out in 2007. We sold those large stores to PetSmart, 17 of them, and that helped our relationship with PetSmart. And then the balance we just slowly got out of and closed. And I think the last transaction was with Pet Value, took some of the leases over. So that was a huge relief that we didn't, not only was it a conflict, it was at the end very unprofitable. Again, a little bit like the livestock. What are we good at?
Yeah.
What are we not good at? And we were not good at retail. And we weren't involved. There was no retail division in the company.
Right.
There was no department. It was other people. Some of those employees weren't even aware Hagen was involved. And it was an eternal conflict that once we got from underneath it, was a boon to the business, and it was the right thing to do. We were for it, all of us, in a way. We were proud of it. They were beautiful stores, like Waterfalls, the reptile sections, the livestock. When they were sold and they were revamped, it wasn't quite the same.
It's like those stores in Germany where they have a living room you could sit in with this incredible planet, a monotype planet tank. And then you go, they have a discus section and a cardinal section, and you're just floored. You go, if stores like this were in the U.S., everybody would have fish. Right.
It's just, why can't we do it? Sort of, sometimes it's frustrating. But, my dad always said nothing happens in this industry until a pet is sold or adopted to be more modern and contemporary. And I think sometimes we forget about the pet, and we can do a better job in North America. Some retailers do great, but I think some of the larger players today need to remember how important it is to.
I agree.
And I'll say this as well, not to be too serious. Pets aren't sold on Amazon. right? So, when you have this conflict, this channel conflict that, retailers face and need to deal with every day, you can't buy a leopard gecko on Amazon.
That's a good thing.
You can't buy a plant, a Anubias plant on Amazon, at least not today. So I think, we tried to do it right at the time, but it wasn't for us, and it was a good thing when we got out of it. But it was a bit bittersweet because they were some of the nicest pet stores in North America.
Wow, I never saw one. No, now I'm jealous.
The super pet ones, yeah, they were pretty.
Yeah, I remember PJ's.
Yeah,
I think we sold them for a while too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. When did you take over the reins?
I think it was 2006.
2006?
I think it was 2006, yeah.
And your brother does the birds.
Mark is the Hari brand manager, and
the other brother's in sales?
He's in administration and finance. He's got his hands on the money, and he also does export. So he does our holding family office as well.
Now, do you have a sister or no?
No, just the three of us.
The three of us, okay. Yeah. All right. So, I was going to ask you how Hagen acquired Tetra distribution rights for Canada, but you answered the question. I didn't know you had it for so long.
Yeah, it was
you had it from ground zero.
From the very beginning, yeah. And we were their longest standing agent. And when they had Tetra had parties at Interzoo, and we had our own fish food now and our own water conditioners, and, it was a bit of a conflict for them, but they never took Canada away from us. The U.S. market, obviously, when Carnation bought them in the 70s, we still had a contract, so they had to deal with the Hagen brothers. All went down to New York, and I think they pulled a few people and gave them some suits, so it looked like we had a bigger group of people. And they had to negotiate with us because they bought this company and they didn't have the right to sell the product in their market.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's another story that my uncles hopefully will share, and it's quite a background to that one. But no, we were Tetras until I think it was the early, I still went to, I would say early 90s, mid 90s, when they finally said, okay, you guys can't be our agent anymore. You got all your own stuff. But there was a long, long history there. And Dr. Bench was like my uncle. Like he was
Really?
Uncle Ulrich. So he was a close personal friend of my father. And he retired to the Bahamas.
Right, I remember
my parents also had a residence and spent some of their time. So they were very close. And his wife, Ursula, was my mom's best friend.
Really?
So it was a real family thing. And my dad was devastated when they sold, because he had hoped to he had known that Ulrich wanted to retire, but Uncle Ulrich, but he was devastated because he had thought maybe he could put a consortium of agents together, like the Australian agent, and
Sure.
there was a family in Holland that we knew very well, and maybe pull enough money together to give Dr. Bench what he wanted. But he just went out and sold it without informing my dad, and that hurt my father, because I remember eating Tetra Mint fish food when I was a kid.
Really?
Oh yeah. And Ulrich's son Frank was a very close friend. I don't see him much anymore. He lives in Hawaii, but no, it was a long history there. Remember picking the Tetra Mint at the warehouse, T1 in the breeder tin, and it was like 12 packs of each and 6 packs and inners, and
Is
it was
it
just
still,
huge.
it's still sold in Canada, right?
Yeah, it's Tetra's different company today, right? I mean, it's a huge company, great company.
Yeah.
Nothing negative to say, but it's not. I don't know how much mosquito larvae is left in some of the tins.
Here's a good one for you. So, Metaframe is a huge brand, of course, as you know.
Yeah.
And there's actually a group of Metaframe collectors. That's how big the brand was. And so I was really excited to get John Willinger, because
That was a great video.
that
Loved
was
it.
Will Ness, and
Yeah.
Will Ness and Metaframe got together, one other company, formed a kind of a consortium,
Right.
wanted to go public, did go public, and then Mattel bought them.
Right.
And I thought Mattel bankrupted them, but they didn't. Mattel sold to Equology. How the heck did Equology get the money to buy Metaframe? And then Equology got over his head and he went bankrupt. And you guys bought it, but you didn't buy everything. So what I was curious about is, why didn't you buy the whole thing from bankruptcy court? Why did you pick and choose? Because you got the habit trail,
Right.
but you didn't get the bubble up filter.
No, there were certain products that they didn't take. Fortunately, way before my time, I heard a few things, but I know that was a big moment for the company. It was a big decision. It was unlike my father to do something like that. He was more organic and conservative, spend what we have. And Horst, his younger brother, I think was the one that drove. I think Horst was the one that kind of drove the business in the second half, if you will, of the company's life. And I think it was, they wanted habit trail.
Right.
From what I heard on some business trips with Horst, Living World was really important. Dynaflow.
Yeah. You guys got all those.
Vibroscapers and Aquascapers and those type of brands. Yeah. But why they didn't go all the way in, maybe we had products that covered those categories. And we kind of did a disservice to some of it. I think that we could have done better with some of those brands. And they were just looking, Horst was just had something in his, I think it was just habit trail was really what, but he'd have to explain it.
And the funny thing is you had Habit Trail for a number of years, and now you've rebranded it, and I love the new brand. I think that Ovires.
Oh yeah, that was in there for a while. Canada, we still do some small animal. We have the Living World brand is very popular for us in Canada. We have all the rabbit pellets, and we have our own extrusion. We have some really great high-end Timothy hay base. But we don't do Habit Trail anymore. It's gone. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you had a dog food company for a while, Extruder. You made dog food, didn't you?
Yeah, we had a pet food plant in New York State. We were very proud of that. Great employees, and we sold that in 2015. We had some financial difficulty, and we had to just get down to the core of what Hagen is and who Hagen is, and co-manufacturing food for big American brands. And losing money doing it was not core, and that was one of the three. It was the retail division, Hagen France. We never were able to make money at Hagen in France. It's a tough market to make money in, but people do. It's a great pet market. French
love their pets.
They love their pets, and it's a wonderful country. But we had to close that, and we had to close Hagen Pet Foods, which was tough. I was one that regularly visited the factory with a colleague, and I had to go down there and make the announcement. Yeah. But I think we put it in good hands with Midwestern Pet, are the ones that bought it, and I think they're doing pretty good with it. Good. It's a great plant, wonderful, just down to earth, hardworking folk. The New York, Pennsylvania border, Waverly, New York. We were so proud when you saw your own food coming off, 30 bags a minute, every 2 seconds, 3 seconds, a sack of food coming down. It was a big moment for us and for my dad. And it was my brother Mark really who was the inspiration to make that acquisition and then revamp the factory. It had been shuttered, so we had to put in new micro mixing. We updated the extruder. We put quite a bit of money into the facility, and it was a very proud moment for us. And we won Co-Packer of the Year for a very well-known brand. I can see their logo right from where I'm sitting. And unfortunately, they then made an acquisition and cut us off in 60 days, and we never recovered because we allowed them to be about 60% of the capacity of the factory, and that when you lose that overnight, it's really hard to get that back.
Sure.
And at the time too, Gary, there was a lot of consolidation and co-manufacturing, and we were one factory in the Northeast. And to compete against these bigger companies that were buying, everybody out, and then the economies of scale and, buying proteins and carbs and fats, we couldn't compete. So we were tough on the co-manufacturing. And then the Canadian dollar, we were selling our food in Canada and making it in the United States. And the dollar went that way, and we just got. So we moved the factory production. We bought into a plant in British Columbia. We're part owners of it. Great partners at Omni Pet Nutrition, and that's where we make our food today.
That's great.
And we've never looked back.
And BC's beautiful.
BC's beautiful, and the people are very nice as well.
Great place.
Yeah. Hey, you think about it, we did quite a few different things.
You did a lot of things. My head's spinning still. I can't. You told me things I didn't even.
Pet food manufacturing. That was the big one.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was the big one.
So, is there milestones, breeding accomplishments? Obviously, what you've done with birds is a huge milestone.
Yeah.
The birds that you bred, what he's done has been pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
He's been well known for.
I call it our crown jewel because it's really truly vertically integrated. We make it, we test it.
Yeah.
And it's a the most real brand at Hagen, if you will. And it's a wonderful place. If you're ever in Montreal to visit, you'd love the day with Mark. You two would get along famously. So it's,
he's a big hobbyist?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Does he like fish and reptiles too?
Oh, yes.
He
absolutely,
does?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I love talking to other fish geeks too.
We would set up a tank every time we went to the Bahamas over Christmas or holidays, and sometimes in the summer. The first thing we would do is set up the tank, get our snorkeling gear, go down the beach, go to the cove, get some damsels and some sergeant majors, try to get a royal beauty or a royal grandma or rock beauty, queen angels.
Wow.
set up the tank. And then what we were always proud of is on the last day of the vacation, we take all the fish back, take our buckets, walk right back to where we were, and let them go right where we caught them. Yeah. I think that I caught the same Royal Grandma a few times. You know, you look at me, you kind of recognize me once in a while. But yeah, Mark's a hobbyist. That's definitely a milestone for us in our history.
So any final notes, like what's your hope for the future of your family legacy company?
I have 4 children, 4 beautiful, healthy children, but none of them work at the company. And none of them want to work at the company. So I can't speak for the youngest, he's only 16, but the first 3 do not want to work at the company. Mark's 2 daughters also do not work at the company and are independently successful. I have 1 nephew, Tom's eldest son, Justin Hagen. He works in the purchasing and replenishment, and he's getting involved in sourcing, and he's learning more and more of the business. So we do have that. But it's hard. It's a tough question because, you know, I'm 32 years now in the business, and you know, I'm getting closer to 60 than I'd like to admit. So at some point, you know, we definitely love what we do. We're so blessed to be in this fantastic industry.
Right.
This is, you know, I have some friends that you know, have companies and are entrepreneurs, and I'm just the lucky sperm. You know, just lucky to be doing what I'm doing. And we have great employees, great suppliers, and obviously great customers. And we're sincere. We're not perfect. You know, it's a family company. Sometimes there's emotion where there shouldn't be, things that are, you know, not as structured as it could be. But when we move, we move. And when we make decisions, we make decisions. And it's not always about profit. It's not always about, you know, I've seen too many companies that have been bought out, and they're not what they used to be, or they get, you know, they buy the management, they buy the people, they buy the company, and then the first thing some of these acquirers do is get rid of all the people that made that company what it was, right, or what it is. I would hope that whatever the future is for Hagen, that, you know, it can continue to have its place in the industry and earn its place in the industry. But for me personally, you know, not having my children working in the company, there's other things in life at some point, you know, what you're doing is incredible, you know, so is there something else that I can do in my life? I don't know, but the company too needs leadership, evolution as well. You know, sure. It's got to be the right person, but he or she is out there, and maybe at one point there's a scenario where I could step back a little bit and still be part of it, but not have that daily. It's a daily, incredible amount of effort.
Sure.
That it's a global company, and there's a lot of challenges that comes with.
How many employees do you have?
Gosh, I don't know. It's not a huge number because, you know, we outsource a lot of our warehousing and logistics. Probably around 400, I would think, 450.
It's still a huge number.
Yeah. But it's just the complexity, you know, being in all the different categories and these different markets, and then the way technology is interplaying in everything today, and, you know, the way the retail structure has changed. So there's opportunity in that, right? But it's a wonderful thing. And, you know, I'll do it as long as I can do it, or as long as they'll have me. My brothers will have me do it. And we get along relatively well. You know, we'll have our disagreements, but the next day is the next day. And shout out to Dieter. He's 84, comes into work 4 days a week. He's our vice chairman, so we have that connection to the past. And I will do my best to get them on this chair virtually, and you'll probably have to interrupt them a few times because they're going to start arguing with each other. But there's one sad thing is that my dad never sat down. He said he would, and he never sat down and wrote his life story, because what a story it was, and all the people that he met and touched. So that's a bit of a shame.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Gary, thanks for having me.
I really
Thank you for what you're doing, and I'm going to sit down and watch that Hearts Mountain video.
Oh, you have to.
I will.
There's so many similarities between Max Stern and your father. It blows me away. That's why I asked if he spoke English, because Max Stern went to the United States and went to a friend of his he loaned money to, and the friend didn't have the money to pay him back, but he goes, I got 5,000 canaries. So wow. Max, who knows nothing about birds, says, okay, I'll take him to the U.S. Wow. He goes to the Hamburg steamship lines, and he says, "Hey, I got these canaries I want to ship, but I want free passage because I got to be on the boat to take care of them back in the hull of the boat."
Wow.
So they give him free passage.
Amazing story.
He gets to New York. He doesn't speak any English. He has no money and no place to live, but he has 5,000 canaries. He takes them and sells them to pet shops.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought your dad's got to be the same kind of deal.
There's stories about the bird seed, and he had a Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah.
And the icy streets of Montreal, and he couldn't get up Pine Avenue. And he had bags of bird seed, and the car wasn't powerful enough. But what I remember him telling me, he made more money in his first month selling to the pet stores in Montreal than he would have in a whole year working at Heston Newman in Hamburg. So he was hooked. And there was
That's awesome.
going back to Germany. There was no going back to that, office. He was hooked. And and there was a lot of history between the companies. My dad's best friend, who died a little bit too young, was Alan Cliff, who was the president of Hearts Mountain Canada. That was my dad's truly best friend. So I think my dad and Alan sometimes sat and set canary seed pricing, because we were the pet shop people, and Alan was Woolco Woolworths in Canada,
Woolworths,
and they had huge pet sections. So Hearts Mountain had that channel, and they were very generous with my dad. Hearts has a big history with Hagen in Canada, and Leonard and my father as well. He built those relationships, and those relationships are what gave him his success, and he was forever thankful. So he was always such a generous person. It was never about himself. He had this 15-year-old briefcase. He drove his cars for 12 years. Yeah. It's like, he lived in the same house since 1967, and in a relatively, not a posh neighborhood by any sense. We all went to public high school. He was just a normal person, but he had such great presence with people that they wanted to be part of his life, personally and professionally, and that's how he profited from that. And Hearts and Hagen had a long history of working together. My uncles will share it. But anyhow, thank you, Gary.
Thank you. It was so good seeing you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, that's a wrap.